You need to watch this if you crave chills down your spine. Welcome to Soul Studios. Here, true crime meets the unknown. Suspense lurks in every shadow, and supernatural forces whisper from the dark. We craft chilling, edge-of-your-seat short stories inspired by the eerie, the unexplained, and the most haunting mysteries. 3 new stories drop every week, each one darker than the last. Are you ready to step inside? Subscribe now before the next story finds you.
In the fall of 1996, a young wife in a quiet Washington town vanished during a thunderstorm, leaving behind a chilling scene. A toppled chair, a few drops of blood, and a wedding photograph with one face violently scratched out. What began as a desperate missing person search soon revealed whispers of betrayal, obsession, and a love triangle that tore a community apart. Nearly 3 decades later, a stunning new discovery would crack the case wide open, but also raise unsettling questions that may never be answered. If you crave true crime stories that keep you guessing until the very last second, subscribe to Soul Studios and turn on notifications, because the most disturbing truths are the ones hiding in plain sight. On a warm September night in 1996, the quiet town of Pinehaven was forever changed. 27-year-old Laura Bennett kissed her husband goodbye as he left for an overnight work trip, and then she vanished. Inside their darkened home, police later found eerie clues: a toppled chair, a smear of blood on the kitchen floor, and a wedding photograph torn in half on the living room rug. In the photo, the face of a smiling bridesmaid had been violently scratched out. Something horrific had happened here, and as investigators would soon learn, this was no random crime. It was the sinister fallout of a love triangle turned deadly. Laura and her husband Mark Bennett seemed like a picture-perfect couple. They were high school sweethearts who had married young and settled in Pinehaven, Washington, a woodsy, tight-knit community where everyone knew everyone. Laura worked at the local library. Mark managed a hardware store. By all accounts, they were happy, at least for a while. Laura's best friend, Rebecca Sorensen, was a constant presence in their lives. She had been Laura's maid of honor and was like a sister to her. Neighbors often saw Rebecca at the Bennett's house for coffee or dinner. From the outside, nothing appeared unusual. But behind closed doors, Laura and Mark's marriage was under growing strain. In the summer of 1996, friends recall Laura had become anxious and withdrawn. She confided to her sister that she suspected Mark was having an affair. Rebecca, the ever-supportive friend, assured Laura it was just stress making her paranoid. Laura wasn't convinced. She started keeping a journal and combing through bank statements and phone records, looking for signs of betrayal. And then she found one. One August afternoon, while cleaning the house, Laura discovered a crumpled movie ticket stub in Mark's pants pocket, dated on a night he'd told her he was working late. The movie was one Laura had already seen, with Rebecca. It hit her like a punch to the gut. Mark and Rebecca, her husband and her best friend. The realization made her physically ill. Over the next weeks, Laura's behavior changed. She became distant with Mark and cooled toward Rebecca, barely speaking to them at a mutual friend's barbecue. In her diary, Laura wrote, "I feel like a fool. They think I don't know, but I do. I'm so angry I can't breathe." She didn't confront them outright, not yet. Instead, she let her resentment quietly simmer. One entry ended ominously, "I'm going to have it out with them, soon." On the evening of September 18, 1996, Pinehaven was lashed by a sudden thunderstorm. Mark Bennett hurried to drive off for a business trip in Seattle, a 2-hour journey. According to Mark's account, Laura saw him off with a stiff hug on their front porch just before the downpour hit. It was the last time he, or anyone else, would see her alive. Late that night, around 11 p.m., a neighbor, Mrs. Caldwell, noticed something odd. Through the sheets of rain, she thought she saw a dark-colored car idling near the Bennett's driveway. She caught a glimpse of a figure in a raincoat rushing toward Laura's front door. Assuming it was just Rebecca checking on her friend, the two women often visited each other, Mrs. Caldwell went back to watching TV. She had no idea she might have witnessed the prelude to a crime. The next morning, Mark Bennett returned home from his trip and walked into a nightmare. Rainwater had blown under the front door, puddling in the entryway. One kitchen chair was knocked over and Laura's purse lay spilled on the floor, its contents strewn about. Most chilling of all, Mark found a few spots of blood leading from the kitchen to the back mudroom. Laura was gone. Panicked, Mark called the police. Within hours, Pinehaven police launched a search. They feared they were dealing with either a kidnapping or worse. Officers fanned out across the area despite the storm debris and muddy roads. That afternoon, a deputy made a grim discovery down a wooded embankment off a quiet country road. Laura's body. She was found half hidden under pine branches, as if someone had tried to conceal her. Her neck bore dark bruises consistent with strangulation, and her wedding ring was missing from her finger. The medical examiner later confirmed that Laura had been strangled to death, likely the night before. It was now officially a homicide investigation. Back at the Bennett home, detectives combed for evidence. There were no signs of forced entry. Laura likely knew her attacker and had let them in. The few blood drops suggested a brief struggle in the kitchen. Investigators bagged the torn wedding photograph found on the rug. In it, Laura and Mark smiled for the camera on their wedding day, but someone had scratched out the face of the bridesmaid standing next to Laura. That bridesmaid was Rebecca Sorensen. Detectives wondered if Laura herself had defaced the photo out of anger or jealousy upon discovering the affair. It was a glaring red flag pointing toward a motive. Laura knew, and if Laura knew about the affair, Mark and Rebecca might have had a powerful reason to silence her. Detective Alan Ruiz, leading the case, brought Mark in for questioning first. In the interrogation room, Mark appeared genuinely distraught, eyes red from crying, voice shaking. He insisted he had no idea who could have hurt his wife. He claimed he'd been in Seattle the night of the murder, alone in a motel, and only returned when she failed to answer his morning phone call. Detective Ruiz asked Mark point blank about his relationship with Rebecca. Mark's face went pale. He hesitated, then admitted he and Rebecca had gotten too close over the past few months. It started as emotional support. Rebecca would listen when Laura and Mark fought, and it became an affair. Mark swore that Laura didn't know about it, and that he had even ended the fling with Rebecca recently to try to fix his marriage. Detective Ruiz wasn't so sure about that. Laura's scratched-out wedding photo and diary entries, now in evidence, told a different story, one of a woman scorned and enraged. With the spotlight now on Rebecca Sorensen, police brought her in next. Rebecca, a 26-year-old receptionist, arrived with a lawyer and an attitude of shock and grief. She broke into sobs upon hearing Laura was dead, insisting she could never hurt Laura. Under gentle questioning, Rebecca admitted the affair with Mark, crying that it was a terrible mistake. She claimed she was home alone on the night of September 18th, reading in bed. No one could corroborate that. Detective Ruiz noticed a bandage on Rebecca's left hand. Rebecca nervously explained she cut herself washing dishes. Ruiz wasn't buying it. It looked more like a fresh scratch. He suspected it could have been from Laura fighting for her life. He asked to take a DNA sample from Rebecca, standard procedure given the circumstances. Her attorney quickly refused. That raised eyebrows, but it was within her rights. Investigators dug deeper. They discovered that a month before the murder, Laura had changed the beneficiary on her life insurance policy from Mark to her sister. If Mark knew that, his financial motive to kill Laura would have disappeared. But if he didn't know, he might have assumed he'd get a payout. That fact was intriguing, but it cut both ways. Meanwhile, forensic techs examined Laura's fingernails, which had broken in the struggle. They found tiny bits of tissue and skin, likely from Laura scratching her attacker. Unfortunately, DNA testing in 1996 was in its infancy in their rural county lab. The sample was too small and degraded to profile with the tech available then. It was logged into evidence storage, essentially a clue frozen in time, waiting for technology to catch up. Evidence against either suspect was largely circumstantial. Mark had an alibi, albeit one only he could vouch for. Rebecca had no alibi, but aside from that bandaged cut and the motive, there was nothing definitively tying her to the scene. The neighbour, Mrs. Caldwell, identified Rebecca's car make and colour from memory, a dark green 95 Honda, matching the car she glimpsed that night. But she hadn't seen the licence plate or the driver clearly through the rain. It wasn't enough for a warrant or arrest. Weeks turned into months. The Bennett case made headlines across Washington, love triangle eyed in newlyweds murder. Talk shows debated who was truly guilty. Was it the cheating husband, cold enough to kill the wife he betrayed, or the best friend, driven by obsession and jealousy? In Pinehaven, whispers and suspicions ran rampant. Many townsfolk noticed that Mark and Rebecca, though not openly together, were far from enemies. In fact, some observed the two would occasionally cross paths at the grocery store or a local diner and speak as though nothing had happened. This enraged Laura's family. They were convinced both of them were involved and publicly said so. At Laura's memorial service, her father even confronted Mark, shouting, "We know what you did." The rift in the community was deep. Inside the police department, the case was frustratingly stalled. Detective Ruiz later said it was one of those cases where you know who did it, but you can't prove it, not yet. A grand jury convened in early 1997 to evaluate the evidence for an indictment, but without a DNA match or a witness, they declined to charge anyone. The investigation went cold. Years passed. Mark Bennett left Pinehaven in 1998, quitting his job at the hardware store. Rumor had it he moved to Oregon for a fresh start. Rebecca Sorensen also left town, enduring ostracism and vicious gossip up until her departure. Few were surprised when, just 2 years after Laura's death, Mark and Rebecca quietly married in a small courthouse ceremony in Oregon. They kept it secret, but word trickled back to Pinehaven. The news was a punch in the gut to Laura's grieving family. In their eyes, it was a brazen admission of guilt. The two people they believed had murdered Laura were now building a life together. But if Mark and Rebecca thought leaving Pinehaven would let them escape the past, they were wrong. Their marriage was, by most accounts, troubled. A former neighbor of the couple in Oregon recalled loud arguments and a sense that something was off. Mark became reclusive, rarely socializing. Rebecca, once bright and outgoing, looked pale and thin, as if carrying an immense weight. It seemed the shadow of what happened to Laura followed them everywhere. Guilt, paranoia, or perhaps both, gnawed at them. By the mid-2000s, Mark and Rebecca separated. Mark moved again, this time to California, and the two eventually divorced in 2008. They had no children. Rebecca moved to a small apartment in Spokane and lived a quiet, solitary life. She never spoke publicly about Laura or Mark again. Laura's family, meanwhile, never gave up on her case. Her parents and sister pushed the state police to re-examine evidence over the years. They kept Laura's story alive in the press, occasionally putting up billboards off the highway with Laura's photo and messages like, "Do you know who murdered Laura Bennett?" Every few years, a new detective would take a crack at the case, but nothing happened until 2025. In January 2025, the Pinehaven Police Department's cold case unit received an unexpected package. Rebecca Sorensen had died a month earlier, succumbing to an aggressive form of cancer at age 55. After her death, her attorney mailed a letter to the police, a letter Rebecca had given him with instructions to deliver posthumously. It was a confession. Detective Ruiz, now a grizzled veteran near retirement, was still with Pinehaven PD and couldn't believe his eyes as he read Rebecca's handwritten pages, paper unfolding. In the letter, dated just weeks before her death, Rebecca finally told the truth about what happened on September 18th, 1996. She admitted to being at the Bennett's house that night. The letter described how Laura confronted her in the kitchen about the affair. They argued heatedly as a storm raged outside. Laura, hurt and furious, screamed that she would expose them for the liars they were. According to Rebecca, Laura slapped her and threatened to call Mark's boss and the whole town to tell them what kind of people Mark and Rebecca really were. Rebecca snapped. "I never meant to kill her," Rebecca wrote in shaky script. I wanted her to stop yelling, to stop threatening to destroy everything. She came at me and I pushed her. Then my hands were on her neck and I didn't let go. Laura had fought back hard, scratching at Rebecca, explaining the wound on Rebecca's hand that Detective Ruiz noticed so many years ago. But Rebecca was younger and stronger. Fueled by panic and years of jealousy, she strangled Laura on the kitchen floor. The letter went on to detail how Rebecca then staged the scene. She took Laura's wedding ring and some cash from her purse to make it look like a robbery. She dragged Laura's body out to her car in the rain. Terrified of being seen, she waited until after midnight to drive to a remote road by the woods and rolled Laura's body down an embankment, covering it with branches. Rebecca even threw Laura's ring into a river on her drive home, hoping the murder would look like a burglary gone wrong or an abduction. In her final lines, Rebecca addressed the question of Mark. "Mark didn't ask me to do it," she wrote, "but I knew deep down it was the only way we could be together. When it was done, I told him she had been killed by an intruder. I hoped he'd be relieved. But God, I was wrong. He was furious. He yelled at me, called me a monster. We lied to the police. But after that, he never looked at me the same. I killed my best friend for nothing." The words trailed off into a rambling apology and a plea for forgiveness that would never come. The revelations in Rebecca's letter stunned everyone who read it. Detective Ruiz felt a mixture of vindication and frustration. The truth was finally known, but Rebecca was beyond the law's reach now. She had literally taken her secrets to the grave. Mark Bennett, on the other hand, was very much alive, and Rebecca's letter raised new, unsettling questions. How innocent was Mark in all of this? In the end, the torn wedding photo told the whole story. One face scratched away, the other two living under a shadow that would never fade. The truth finally emerged, but justice came too late, leaving an entire town to wonder who else's hands were stained that night. In Pinehaven, secrets don't die, they wait.
Every story has an end, but here, the mysteries never stop. Thank you for watching and being a part of this journey into the unknown. Your support keeps these stories alive, and there's plenty more waiting for you. We drop 3 new stories every week, so if you crave suspense, the unexplained and the downright chilling, make sure you're subscribed and ready for what's next. Until then, keep your lights on, your doors locked, and remember, some stories stay with you long after they're told.